Greenhouse gas emissions is by far the most common topic in environmental talks since the Kyoto Protocol. There are 6 types of gas defined as GHG during the Kyoto Protocol, but they are all summed up in equivalent of carbon dioxide when a total emission, in other words carbon footprint, is expressed. The emissions are grouped based on how directly a company is involved in their generation. The direct emissions are called Scope 1, which are caused by the fuel combustion or leaks of refrigerator and air conditioner gas from the machines or plants that are fully owned and controlled by the company. Indirect emissions are called Scope 2 and Scope 3. Scope 2 covers the emissions generated due to the electricity that the company purchased from energy providers. Scope 3 covers all the rest in the value chain, both from the upstream and downstream activities. They are associated with the product, raw materials, and outsourced services purchased by the company, therefore upstream activities, and the end-of-life treatment of the sold products, therefore customers of the company. To reduce GHG emissions, there are defined targets for countries and companies, but let's have a look at this visual. First, this was introduced by the GHG protocol to understand the activities of each scope. And you can see the 6 greenhouse gas here, 6 types of greenhouse gas. So let's have a look at the targets to reduce the carbon emissions. Net zero target and carbon neutrality sound quite similar to the extent that the person can think they mean the same thing, but there is a difference. But let's talk about carbon offsetting first to make sure that we have the common understanding. Well, it is simply an action that removes carbon from the atmosphere. So there are carbon capturing tools, mechanisms, or projects. So a company or a country can choose to offset their carbons, that at least their impact on the atmosphere, by investing or donating in carbon offsetting, carbon reducing, carbon capturing projects. Let's compare net zero target and carbon neutrality. Net zero is tougher to achieve. It covers the entire value chain and all 3 scopes, therefore suppliers and customers in addition to the company itself. And it requires a real change in the business model or the technology to reduce the emissions. Carbon offsetting is used, but only as a last resort, and only to counteract the emissions that cannot be reduced, even when all the initiatives are implemented. Carbon neutrality, on the other hand, covers only the company's activities, so only Scope 1 and 2. It aims to balance off whatever is emitted and not necessarily decreasing the emissions at the beginning of the process. And CER is also a quite interesting topic because there is a market around that, and CER stands for Certified Emission Reductions. It is issued by Clean Development Mechanism, and it represents the successful emissions reduction equivalent to 1 ton of carbon dioxide. A company or a country has an allowance of a certain amount of carbon emission. And if that company does not use up all its allowance, meaning that it does not emit much carbon reaching the highest limit it is allowed, the remaining right of emitting carbon can be sold to other countries or companies. And since this market is relatively a free market, although there are discussions to regulate it, the price is affected by demand. For example, in 2008, the price of 1 CR was $20. In 2018, it was €8, and a year later, €25.